clear my name, rest assured. I will continue to work hard for the people and constituents of the 27th Congressional District of New York, and I will remain on the ballot running for re-election this November. Thank you very much, and have a great night.
That's Chris Collins speaking after being arrested for insider trading. In other legal news, President Trump's legal team says that it's in negotiation over the terms of any interview with Robert Mueller. Let's go live now to Ed Henry to break that down for us. Ed.
Good to see you, Mark. In fact, the president's legal team is saying tonight that this is a good faith effort on their part to try and get a deal on an interview with the special counsel Robert Mueller. But these two sides are still so far apart on working out the details that this could become a major battle that ultimately is decided by the Supreme Court. Months ago, Mueller privately threatened that if they can't agree on a voluntary interview from the president, he may issue a subpoena to try and compel the president's testimony. The only other time in history that happened was Bill Clinton being subpoenaed to testify in the Lewinsky matter, but he backed down and agreed to do an interview to avoid what could have been an embarrassing defeat at the high court. Mueller originally proposed a wide-ranging interview with the president that has been flatly rejected by his attorneys, Rudy Giuliani and Jay Sekulow, who believe that could set up a series of perjury traps. So after the special counsel last week offered to tighten the focus a bit, Giuliani and Sekulow today tried to narrow it even further. They're trying to shy away from questions, for example, about whether or not the president committed obstruction, in part because they're making the case the president has vast executive power to hire and fire officials like former FBI Director James Comey. Giuliani made clear today another problem they have is that Mueller's team indicated early this year they might start wrapping up the obstruction phase of this probe by June or July to give it space from the midterm election. Well, obviously, that deadline has been obliterated. We're getting closer to the midterm. So now Giuliani is pushing for the investigation to be wrapped by September 1st. The other major concern for the president's team tonight is whether he'll get a fair shake, especially after a new report in the Hill newspaper revealed that the opposition research firm hired by Hillary Clinton's campaign and the DNC to put together the dossier, Fusion GPS, also worked with officials at the FBI, Justice Department, and the intel community. New emails and memos show that former top Obama justice official Bruce Orr was in close contact with that former British spy, Christopher Steele, including conversations they had just days before the FBI first opened its probe into the Trump camp and alleged Russian collusion. Now, since Orr's wife also was on the payroll of Fusion GPS, you can understand why the Trump legal team tonight has some questions about those contacts, Mark.
Indeed, Ed. Thanks very much. Joe DeGeneva is a former U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia. He joins us. Joe, Mueller's telling the president, you can volunteer to do this interview or otherwise I'll force you into it. Is that how it works?
Well, it would work that way ordinarily for a citizen, but the president is a very special person under the Constitution and under investigations like this. The president could very well agree to a voluntary interview. I would not recommend that he do so, and I don't think that he should. If Mueller tries to subpoena him, he's going to have a very, very tough time because according to what we know publicly, there is no criminal conduct involving the president. There is no Russian collusion. There is no crime involving collusion. So what is the reason that Mueller wants to talk to him? It's very obvious. He wants to talk to him for purposes of writing a report and then referring the matter to Mr. Rosenstein to refer to Congress for impeachment. Well, the use of a grand jury subpoena to get testimony from a president for use in an impeachment proceeding is illegal and unconstitutional.
So just to be clear on that then, you take the view that if there was any serious wrongdoing by the president, we would already know it, and that the main object here is just to sit him down and then he'll say something that Mueller can use against him.
Yes and yes. This is clearly nothing more than a testimonial perjury trap to get the president, which has been Mueller's objective from the beginning. You know, one of the things we have to do is realize that there's certain things that are self-evident in some situations. I used to say that crime has a cadence. The Russian collusion case has no cadence. There's no cadence of criminality about the president's conduct. So why does Mr. Mueller want to talk to him? The answer is he wants to try and trap him. There's no evidence whatsoever anywhere in any record, notwithstanding what Adam Schiff says, that the president has done anything wrong, nor anyone around him. In fact, all of the activity of the president's transition team, campaign team involving communications with foreigners was perfectly legal,
right.
And Mr. Mueller has never said that it isn't.
Well, speaking about communications with foreigners, this business of, the assistant deputy under assistant attorney general, or whatever the hell the position was, this guy is surprisingly cozy with a foreign intelligence agent called Christopher Steele. How is it that Bruce Orr, who still works for the Department of Justice, does not understand that what he was doing is wrong and unseemly with all these contacts with Christopher Steele?
Because that's a different standard. What's interesting was the Obama Justice Department at the senior levels and the FBI at the senior levels was a politically corrupt two organizations. Mr. Orr was part of that. He's been demoted 3 times since they discovered his activities, when his text messages and emails were discovered. He's probably being kept on board the department as a courtesy to allow him to retire with a certain amount of time, but also he's probably been forced to cooperate with the IG investigation to testify against other people like Sally Yates and John, whatever his name was, who ran the National Security Division.
Thanks a lot for that, John. That's amazing. You've been demoted 3 times, so eventually he's going to be down to janitor or whatever it is there. Dan Bongino is a former Secret Service agent and NRA TV contributor. He's also author of the book Spygate: The Attempted Sabotage of Donald J. Trump. And Dan joins us now. Would you, if you were in the president's position, would you agree to sit down with Mueller?
Heck no. Why? Mark, why should he sit down with Mueller? His case is based on nothing. Mark, let's walk this through. Let's be logical for a minute. I know liberals have a difficult time with this, right? But this entire case as we know it is based on this dossier, this spurious, nonsensical dossier. Let's walk through what the FBI themselves said about the dossier. The director of the FBI said the information was salacious and unverified. The number 2 said they would have no investigation without the dossier. The head of the division in charge of the case said the verification of the dossier was in its infancy. And the lead investigator in the case said there's no there.
Right.
Why would he sit down with this guy? This is obviously a trap. He did nothing wrong.
Well, as you say, that's all logical, and I would buy that if, if somebody was trying this with Mr. Smith at the county court. But what about the politics of this? I mean, half the country is going to go bananas if Trump refuses to sit down with Mueller. So in other words, is the risk of walking into a perjury trap less than everybody claiming Trump's pulled off a coup because he won't sit down with this cockamamie guy who wants to talk about some lousy Steele dossier?
You know, it's a great point, Mark. There are the political price and the legality of it are 2 different arguments. On the political front, which you asked, yes, there will be a price. But here's the problem I have with that, Mark. If I thought Mueller was acting in good faith, I would say, all right, maybe it may be worth doing it then at that point if it's limited in scope. The problem is, Mark, there's no evidence of that. Mike Flynn sat down with investigators from the case with no lawyer in the White House, too. Right. The FBI went back, admitted that there were no signs of deception. They then prosecuted him for what? For lying to the FBI. Does that make any sense? There's no good faith effort here at all.
No, and I'm absolutely opposed to this whole lying to the FBI thing. I think that's disgraceful. Dan, I do want to get this in because despite allegedly being under Russian control, President Trump's administration has just slapped new sanctions on Russia in response to the nerve agent poisoning of a former Russian agent and his daughter in the UK, and the sanctions will kick in later this month. Actually, another young woman over in Britain subsequently died of this poisoning. So Trump is acting against Putin because Putin's poisoning and in fact killing the citizens of American allies. What do you make of this?
Yeah, Mark, if Trump is a Russian asset being controlled by Putin, he is certainly the worst Russian asset in the history of human intelligence gathering. His military wiped out 200 Russian mercs on a Syrian battlefield. He has led the effort to cut off the Nord Stream 2 pipeline to economically damage Russia. Magnitsky's expanded that. I mean, Mark, listen, we're having conversations like we're rational because we are, but trying to get through the 6-inch thick skull of liberals who have committed to this Russian collusion thing is useless. Nothing we say is going to make a difference. Facts don't matter anymore.
All that stuff you said, Dan, all that shows is that the conspiracy just goes deeper than any of us could possibly suspect. Thanks a lot, Dan Bongino. The blue wave may be weakening to a blue stream or maybe just a blue trickle. Lou Dobbs will discuss that with us up next. For more than a year, Democrats have been hyping an electoral blue wave that will arrive and sweep away Republicans like the Pharaoh's army. But the wave may not be arriving as planned. Democrats hope to flip Ohio's 12th congressional district in a special election last night, but the race is still too close to call. Meanwhile, almost every candidate endorsed by socialist darling Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was defeated. The great Lou Dobbs is with us from Lou Dobbs Tonight over on Fox Business. The most interesting thing, Lou, is always the differences between the parties. On the Republican side, let's do with the Republicans first, because you're the great scourge of the establishment rhino squish.
I've arrived. I love that.
No, you are. I love it when you're like hammering those guys.
I'm not thrilled with many orthodoxies, whether left or right, but particularly the venomous and so awfully wrong left in this country. It's extraordinary. And Ocasio-Cortez is suddenly anointed the face of the Democratic Party. I have to say it's a motion that I would heartily second and endorse fully, because she knows nothing about economics. She actually said that that the unemployment rate is so low under Trump because everyone has two jobs.
Right.
There is no reasoning, no rationality.
You know that, Lou. If 50% of the country has two jobs, that's full employment. And you know it makes sense.
Absolute sense. And well, as much sense as the far left ever makes. And to think that she is aware that there is, as she put it, it's happening. There's something happening. She keeps talking about something, and no one yet has ascribed a label, a descriptive label to any of it.
No. I think she's better to leave it to as vague, because when you pin down the something, she's unimpressed. Well, what's interesting about this though is that she was a star. She kind of burst on the scene. She was the new star, and she's like, it's clear she's not star quality.
It's clear, I think, perhaps to you, to me, to this audience, but I'm not sure it's clear at all to the Democrats, because they are the ones, after all, who carry around as if it's precious cargo, Trump derangement syndrome. They carry around the idea that other people's money is better spent by them. There are all sorts of delusional aspects to their everyday life, including who will be the face of the Democratic Party for years to come.
Well, let's look at over on the GOP side. As I said, you like to crush the rhino squishes like a bug beneath your thumb.
I like that.
Who came out better from last night, the Trumpism or rhino squishism?
Well, it's interesting. If I can just give you a bit of a long answer. The president tweeted he was 5 for 5. Yeah. He endorsed 5 candidates. 5 candidates won or are leading tonight. And that's pretty good. Not a single person running for office in the Republican Party thanked Paul Ryan for their victories, but they were all thanking President Trump. So I think there's a moral here for the rest of the Republicans, including rhinos. They had better quickly affix themselves to the Trump agenda if they intend to win in November.
So it's like go Trump or go home, basically.
Exactly.
And you're a little disappointed, Chris Kobach? It's all a bit neck and neck in that
Well,
race?
I'm thrilled that he's ahead in the count to this point, something like 4,000 provisional ballots. And as Secretary of State, he will be one of the great things. I've known Chris Kobach for a long time. He is strong. He is absolutely resolute. He is an original thinker. That's something that's alien to American politics, just ask President Trump. And I think he will make a terrific governor for the state of Kansas. But what I really like today is the man as Secretary of State is the one who will be responsible for counting those ballots. And they said, oh, wait a minute, you have to recuse yourself. This is my language, not his, but the intent is clear. He told them to go to hell. Because he wants to be sure that it's fair and it will be orderly, and that's exactly the right answer from any Republican.
Yeah, and I agree with you that he's an original thinker, and I love what he says about immigration and voter ID and all those critical issues. What about, though, what they say about Ohio? Just quickly, Lou. I think Mitt carried it by 10. Last time, Trump by 12 points. Again, why is that so close?
It's close because of turnout in large measure. The Republicans did not turn out as they should have. They're so far behind 2016 levels. It's funny. Tom Perez, the chairman of the DNC, saying he's got great optimism. Remember, Ohio's 12th district was going to be in the blue wave column. Unfortunately, he's trying to spin the idea that a party that turned out almost twice as many people in the 12th district as the Republicans will absolutely slay it.
Well, you can, if you get close up to it, you can still just see about that. Oh, there it is. Just like a little droplet on the floor, the blue wave. Lou Dobbs, thank you. Criminal illegal immigrants roam free in the United States. But Democrats say the only problem is that the borders aren't open enough. That's next. Illegal immigrants are finding all manner of ways to enter the United States. Last year, more than 700,000 people illegally overstayed visas within the U.S. Meanwhile, illegal crossings into the U.S. from Canada have more than doubled. And on the Mexican border, crossers are increasingly aware they can exploit hysteria about family separation, so-called, to their advantage. A man caught illegally crossing the Mexican border with a girl claimed she was his daughter. In fact, the girl was entirely unrelated to him, and he had raped her multiple times. Thomas Homan is a former director of ICE, and he joins us now. Tom, 700,000 visa overstayers in 1 year suggests, if nothing else, that this figure we've heard for years now, about 11 million so-called undocumented immigrants, is likely to be something of an underestimate. Would you agree?
Well, I think the overstay visas make up about 40% of the estimate, 11, 12 million. But it's something we got to address. I mean, we've asked Congress again. Same talking points I've used for a long time. We've asked Congress to address the visa overstays, to make it a crime to overstay the visa. It's not a crime like entering the United States illegally is a crime. So Congress can certainly help us by making that a crime and holding people accountable for breaking their promise of leaving the United States on a temporary visa.
But just to be clear on this, we live in a modern high-tech age. Many countries, such as France or the United Kingdom, for example, have exit controls. They check you out, as it were. Why is it that we presumably know these people have overstayed their visas, but that nothing gets done about it? Is it just because, as you've explained, it's actually not illegal to ignore that?
Well, it's not illegal, but we do address overstay population. But again, there's 11, 12 million, and there's a few thousand officers. So we prioritize those that have a criminal nature. When we look at those overstayed visas, we actually prioritize those who come from countries of interest that meet a certain demographic, and we look for those who have committed crimes, been arrested. We look for them first. But we've got to remember, a lot of stories I'm reading is, well, the president's too concentrated on the wall and he's too concentrated on that, not enough about the overstays. We've got to remember, the people that get a visa, they do go through a clearance program, so we are aware of their criminal history. Where those coming across the border illegally, many of them are criminals, so we really do need to concentrate on that southern border.
Let's look at what's happening on the Canadian border. I gather a lot of this is just south of Montreal. It's like a kind of 30-mile strip of the Vermont-Quebec border, what you guys call your Swanton sector. I believe, where they're basically just small rural border crossings, often like the famous town of Derby Line, where the town library and the Opera House actually straddle the border. They're shared communities. These are not places which historically have seen a lot of illegal immigration. Why are suddenly Mexicans, Middle Easterners, discovering that Canada is an easy way to get into the U.S. from?
Because of that exact reason. They have figured out Canada has a very weak immigration system. I mean, have you seen in the last year how many refugees that couldn't play the system here under this president, who takes it very seriously, went to Canada because Canada has very low immigration, volumes, and they have weak immigration laws. This is why now these numbers have ticked up on the northern border. This is a perfect time to us work with Canada to help them strengthen their immigration laws. For instance, they should require a visa for Mexicans when they enter Canada. And we can work, we have great relationships with Canadian law enforcement. This is something we should be working on together. But I actually grew up in upstate New York off the St. Lawrence River and Thousand Islands region. There's places you don't have 100 feet of vision. So it's less than a 1-minute boat ride across the St. Lawrence River to get to the United States. And it's a hard swath of land to cover.
No, and often those border posts are just one room. I mean, seriously, though, Justin Trudeau sentimentalizes illegal immigration even more than the Democrats do. Realistically, working with the Canadians isn't going to get too far, is it, Tom?
Well, I think now that they've seen what happened with the number of refugees that left the United States to go to Canada because they're weak, I've talked to Canadian immigration authorities. They're concerned. So I think for the first time in a long time, they're actually looking to see how can they toughen it up. I went to a law enforcement seminar up in New York, and I met with some Canadian law enforcement, and I think they've awoken to this issue, and I think you're going to see them make some changes this year.
Okay, let's hope so. Thomas Homan, former director of ICE, thank you. Earlier this year, Philadelphia's mayor celebrated when a court ruling allowed the city to keep its sanctuary city policies. Here he is.
A sanctuary city, yeah. A sanctuary city, yeah.
Yeah, here's what that song actually looks like in practice. Juan Ramon Vasquez, an illegal immigrant from Honduras, was released by Philadelphia police despite an ICE detainer request and then went on to rape a child. But in New York, Governor Andrew Cuomo says ICE is the real threat to the safety of the public.
We want a police force that fights terrorism. We don't want what we have in ICE, which is a politicized police force. I will do nothing cooperatively with ICE. I have sent them letters asking for an investigation. I have said if they do any criminal acts, which a police force can do, we will take criminal action against ICE.
So for the chief executive of a major American state, declaring war on law enforcement agencies takes priority. Robin Biro is a former regional director for Barack Obama's presidential campaign. He joins us now. Robin, what is the reason for the fetishization of illegal immigration that has led people like Cuomo and that Philadelphia mayor to actually declare war on American law enforcement?
You know, I'm glad you asked that. I had to read the full statement in its entirety to try and grasp that. And what he's alleging is that ICE is being misused as just a deportation force. And what he's taking specific issue with is proposed legislation from this administration that will make it harder for undocumented immigrants to get green cards.
Well, wait a minute. Let me stop you there. Yeah. I'm a legal immigrant, and it's actually quite a lot of effort to get a green card if you do it legally.
Right.
Why should people who ignore the system, who just walk into the country, whether from Mexico or Canada or anywhere else, why should they get a green card?
You know, here's my theory on that, and I'm just being very honest after speaking to mayors of sanctuary cities. I honestly believe they're looking at this as a financial issue because their economies benefit from that. Undocumented immigrants pay $11.64 billion in state and local taxes every year. They pay $7 billion into the Social Security system.
That would sound a lot in New Zealand, but in a country with multi-trillion-dollar public expenditures, that's an irrelevant drop in the ocean. And most people would rather have non-criminal immigrants than get an extra 11 billion in taxes for state and local governments.
Well, there was a study in 2014 that was a bipartisan study by the Senate when they were considering an immigration reform bill, and that actually did show that undocumented immigrants were far less likely to commit crimes than native citizens of our country. So I'm not sure that that's entirely true, that there's a huge influx of illegals wanting to commit crimes. The numbers just don't mesh up.
No, that's actually not the case. For example, with ICE, 9 out of 10, Brian Kilmeade mentioned this on Monday's show, 9 out of 10 people detained by ICE have committed a crime.
By entering our country illegally, they certainly have.
No, crimes other than the initial crime of illegal entry, and that gets us. Let me just ask you about this case in Philadelphia. This guy, they won't cooperate with ICE, so you get a child rapist back in every country, every society.
Horrible. Terrible.
But every society generates its own rapists and murderers. What's the point of a system and Democrats cooperating with a system that facilitates the importing of additional rapists and murderers and drunk drivers? What's the point of that? Why do you do it?
Like I said, the studies show that they commit less crimes than native citizens. So I'm assuming they're going off of that. And that was a bipartisan study by the Senate. So, I don't know how you can argue with that. I prefer to speak in facts and not hyperbole.
Well, that's very, Robin, every country is stuck with its own citizens, whether it's America or Chad. You take the rapists and murderers of your own society as a given.
And I want them out.
So that's not a fair metric on which to measure any of the others. But thank you for joining us.
ICE does a great job of getting those out.
Thank you for joining us, Robin. More and more psychologists say they're seeing the symptoms of a new disease, Trump derangement syndrome. Is it real? That's next on Tucker Carlson Tonight.
Images as officers move in, restraining the woman at the base of the Statue of Liberty. She told them her actions were to protest President Trump's immigration policies.
At a Mexican restaurant for dinner last night, the DHS secretary was heckled by protesters.
President Trump's star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame destroyed with a pickaxe again. This TMZ video shows Austin Clay smashing the star.
A woman in Massachusetts, she's being accused of intentionally running her car into another vehicle because it had a Trump bumper sticker on it.
This guy is in no means mentally stable enough to run this country, and he should be impeached, and every congressman who hasn't filed those articles should lose their job.
Yeah, it's time to impeach the congressman who won't impeach Trump. For more than a year and a half, the left has been trapped in the tightening grip of Trump derangement syndrome. It's a fun term, but does it reflect a real psychological issue? More and more psychologists say they're seeing the symptoms, specifically an overpowering fear that President Trump represents the end of the world. I gather this started with a Canadian Broadcasting Corporation survey, Nell Daly. You're a psychotherapist. Do you think Trump stress, Trump derangement is a real syndrome?
No, absolutely not. And actually, it didn't just start with the Trump administration. So any kind of derangement syndrome, when we've been talking about presidents, it started during the Bush administration. Yeah. People said that people had Obama derangement syndrome, and now they're saying that people have Trump derangement syndrome. So it's just a way of discrediting anybody who disagrees with you, essentially.
But let's break that down, because I remember the Bush derangement syndrome. I remember saying to someone at the time, basically George W. Bush, he was a very moderate Republican. He loved Mexicans, for example, unlike the present president. 90% of the time he was like Tony Blair with a ranch, and yet people convinced themselves he was like the new Hitler. Now, here we have a guy who, in some sense, is an even more untypical doctrinaire conservative. He doesn't care about transgender bathrooms. He doesn't care about race. A lot of his family are Jewish, and yet he's apparently the new Nazi. He's anti-Semitic. He's racist. LGBTQ communities are cowering in fear from him. What is it? Is it in the water? Is it fluoride? What's going on?
Well, I think where it starts to break down is that you need to trust your leader. You need to have faith in your leader as a human being, to have faith in their vision, to understand their vision. So where the dialogue breaks down is if you don't have faith in your leader, you don't even want to hear their vision. And people, I mean, Trump has been tweeting that his opponents, people who don't support his political views, have Trump derangement syndrome. So again, in any kind of argument that you're having with somebody, it shuts off the argument completely if you tell the other side that they're crazy.
No, just to be clear on that now.
Yes.
So you're saying that by the president accusing the naysayers of having Trump derangement syndrome, he's actually given them it.
No, I didn't say that. I mean, this is just a term. I don't think he's necessarily. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the president's thinking, but whether I mean, it sounds like when he's tweeting these things, he is diagnosing an entire population of people. But again, this doesn't just happen from Trump, right? Again, this goes back to the Bush administration. This goes back to people who disagreed with Obama.
Let me ask you about a point you just made. I thought that was interesting when you said you have to have faith in your leader, as it were. This is a citizen republic where it chooses one of its own citizens to be the leader. That's why you got rid of George III. And there was a guy, because you didn't have faith in him. He's like walking around with crowns, powdered wigs, and you said, no, we're just going to have a citizen representative. Why can't, if you disagree with the president, why can't you just take the view that he's just some bloke in the office for a couple of years and the pendulum will swing and some other guy will be in there? In other words, why let it ruin your life?
It's a good point, and some people do take that position. Not everybody who has come to me or sits in my office is upset about the current president, but there are a lot of people who are. So individuals handle it differently. But the point is that to show that you're an evolved person, a highly intelligent person, is open to intelligent, nuanced debate.
Right.
And in our culture now, we've stopped having those intelligent, nuanced debates, in part because we stop listening when we're told that we're crazy to have a difference of opinion from the person that we're discussing anything with.
Yeah, but it's not the president who drives someone to climb halfway up the Statue of Liberty and start going bananas, is it?
I think that there are people who would disagree with you. And I think that there are people who would disagree with you that that's necessarily a banana way of protesting.
Okay, well, I'll see you up there. I don't know whether I'll make it to the top, but I'll get 2/3 of the way. See you up there, Nell. Okay. Thanks very much. Big tech companies are colluding to shut down voices on the right, but they're hypocrites. So even more deranged voices on the left are being left untouched. That's next on Tucker Carlson Tonight. Facebook, Apple, Google, Spotify, Twitter, and all the rest of the big tech companies have abruptly banned, suppressed, or otherwise attacked numerous conservative and libertarian voices on their platforms. Officially, it's because we're all a bunch of hate speech or offensive content, but offensive voices on the left aren't facing the same scrutiny. Veteran hate-monger Louis Farrakhan, for instance, has posted numerous videos on Facebook attacking Jews, and one describing the white male as a, quote, freak of a human. The news website, The Daily Caller, as well as this program, both contacted Facebook to ask how those videos don't qualify as hate speech. Thus far, Facebook has removed 2 videos, but the rest of the Farrakhan archive is allowed to stay up there. Jason Nichols is a professor of African American Studies at the University of Maryland, and he joins us tonight. Jason, what do you make of this double standard that the right gets policed by Facebook and co. far more rigorously than the left?
Well, the first thing I would argue is that Louis Farrakhan is not necessarily a member of the left. I think a lot of his views are actually far right. So I think, he doesn't fit very well in this kind of dichotomy. I think a lot of people see a black man and they automatically assume he's on the left. But a lot of his ideas are about personal responsibility and taking ownership of things, and they're very much right-wing ideas. So I wouldn't exactly accept him on the left.
Okay, that's great. So that's our fault too, Farrakhan. Let me just cite one of his things here, though. He says that the United States government is working with Jews to feminize black men by weaponizing marijuana with chemicals. Now, that's the sort of thing, and I don't buy your, he's really a closet right-winger thing. But that's
I don't think he's closeted at all. I think he's very much out about his right-wing views.
But the double standard here is that because he's a black man, and with respect to your thesis, perceived as being on the left, he can talk about Jews If I talked about Jews feminizing black men by putting chemicals in the marijuana, I'd be off Facebook, boom, like that. First, for suggesting that it's possible to feminize black men, and it's possible and that black men are on marijuana, and that Jews are trying to feminize. I mean, that's circles within circles. I'd be gone instantly.
Now, Perhaps. I think that the fundamental thing that we have to think about is that Facebook, Google, Twitter, they are privately owned companies. If they believe that someone has violated their terms and conditions of use, then they can remove them. I would suggest if you have an issue with Farrakhan being on that platform, then you should, like you said, write letters, write emails, and then I guarantee you with enough economic pressure, they will probably remove the video or remove that person.
I think we're beyond economic pressure now. A third of the population of the planet, 2.5 billion people, are on Facebook. That makes them bigger than any sovereign state. You can't really say they're just a private company, Jason. I mean, they're more powerful than the government of Belgium.
Yeah, but at the same time, I would certainly not make the argument that Facebook owes anyone their platform. We know who the guy at the top is. He has the right to set the terms and conditions of the use of Facebook. He felt that someone, like Alex Jones is someone who violated those terms. And I would actually argue that Alex Jones and his reach is much larger than that of Minister Farrakhan. So I think, and his influence. So I think that this is one of the things that we have to take into account is the reach and the influence of the person that we're talking about.
Okay, Jason, thank you very much for that, Professor. And despite the best efforts of Louis Farrakhan, you're an unfeminized black man. Not that there's anything wrong with if you were being feminized or anything. Okay, that's the end of my career. An accused extremist Muslim has been arrested in New Mexico after allegedly trying to turn a compound into a terrorist training camp for children. That story's up next. Facebook, Apple, Google, Spotify, Twitter, and all the rest of the big tech companies have abruptly banned, suppressed, or otherwise attacked numerous conservative and libertarian voices on their platforms. Officially, it's because we're all a bunch of hate speech or offensive content, but offensive voices on the left aren't facing the same scrutiny. Veteran hate-monger Louis Farrakhan, for instance, has posted numerous videos on Facebook attacking Jews, and one describing the white male as a, quote, freak of a human. The news website, The Daily Caller, as well as this program, both contacted Facebook to ask how those videos don't qualify as hate speech. Thus far, Facebook has removed 2 videos, but the rest of the Farrakhan archive is allowed to stay up there. Jason Nichols is a professor of African American Studies at the University of Maryland, and he joins us tonight. Jason, what do you make of this double standard, that the right gets policed by Facebook and co. far more rigorously than the left?
Well, the first thing I would argue is that Louis Farrakhan is not necessarily a member of the left. I think a lot of his views are actually far right. So I think, he doesn't fit very well in this kind of dichotomy. I think a lot of people see